Hello and welcome to another exciting Blender tutorial. We're going to be making a conveyor belt using some crazy tricks. I hope you're excited. Let's jump into it. Okay, so tonight the plan is we're going to make a conveyor belt. This is going to be for our ongoing series about making a short film. And we need a conveyor belt for the second location. So I'm going to talk a bit about how to make one. We're going to do some hard surface modeling to pull it together, but we're also going to do some cool tricks with textures and materials and all kinds of stuff. So I hope you're excited. Let's get started. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is make the actual conveyor belt itself, so like the belt part. Now, there are so many ways we could go about doing this. And the main thing is we need to have it animate. We need it like kind of traveling at a constant rate that we can easily control. And that can be kind of complicated because if you think about it, you've got a flat surface, right, that needs to curve around, right, and go underneath and then curve back around. And that's a pretty complicated thing to pull off. Now we could do a lot of different things like lay out a flat surface and do a bunch of bones and constrain that surface and then wrap the bones around and then animate them on a circle and blah, blah, blah. But actually, I'm going to show you a very clever and simple way to make something like that. You can use this trick with things like roads, all kinds of stuff. And the basic gist of it is we're going to have a static piece of mesh that has an animated texture. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and just delete everything by hitting A to select all and X to delete. Okay, so I'm going to go Shift A and I'm going to grab a Bezier curve. All right, now I want to rotate this curve up. So I'm going to rotate on the X 90 degrees, just so it's sitting up like that. And then I'm going to look at it from the side by hitting 1 on my number keypad. And then what I want to do is I'm going to take this one and I'm going to rotate. Actually, no, I want to use snapping because I want to get these things lined up just right, so I get these nice circular shapes. And to do that, sometimes, like I don't know what degrees to rotate this on, and I want to do it by eye. So I could turn on grid snapping. So I come over here to my snapping tool. And yeah, increment, that's going to be grid snapping. So I grab this, I can grab it on the X, and you can see it's going to move around, but snap to the grid. So if I grab this, I can bring that one there. And now I know this is going to be a nice straight line. But more importantly, I can take this one and let's see, I'll bring this up so that it lines up with it. I'll bring this one down a bit. Just want to get a nice curve. Scale this down, grab X. Bring it over and grab Z. And then I'm going to hit E to extrude, and I will grab this one here, and I'll kind of position it in a similar spot also. So this is important actually. So you see how I can rotate, and I'm not rotating and snapping, right? Now if I grab it, it's not going to snap to the grid. It's actually just this increment snapping. It's snapping, based on an increment, a set increment between each. But if you turn on absolute grid snap, that will actually give us what we want. Okay, so I'm going to go Shift A. Let's go for a circle. We're going to create a circle. We're going to rotate on the X 90 degrees. Now, with curves, right, you can't join points together. Unless I'm wrong. Does anybody know? Can you join points together? Someone tell me. Because you can't join points together, we want to have a continuous curve, like a continuous loop that we're going to use for our conveyor belt. So we need to start off with a circle so that we can have it joined already at the beginning. So I'm going to go into edit mode for this. And I am going to I'll just grab all of these and I'll go F3 and I'll type subdivide. And that'll give me an extra point in every single, in between all these different points. So now what I can do is I can grab these guys right here and I can G, X, and just decide where we want this thing to stretch out to. And then I'll take this one right here. I'm going to keep my grid snapping turned on, and I'm going to have absolute grid snap activate with increment, and that will allow me to snap to the grid points. So there we go. And I don't need this one. So can we dissolve? Yeah, so we can dissolve that vertex, and that will get rid of that because we don't need those control points. So we go F3, dissolve vertice. I can grab this one down right here. And it looks pretty good. And then I'll grab this one. I'm just straightening these up, making sure things are kind of even. Excellent. Awesome. All right, great. So we got this thing, right? Looks like a conveyor belt. Perfect. We're done. So what we're going to do next is we're going to take this spline and we're going to come over here to the geometry tab. And we are going to come over here to extrude. We're going to drag this out. You can see it will expand our conveyor belt. Now with this conveyor belt, we're not actually going to animate it moving in itself. We're going to animate the texture across its surface. But we're going to have to do some things to get that to work. Okay, I want to give it a little bit of depth. So I've got my extrude set to 2.75. That's fine. I'm going to go over to depth. And I'm just going to hold down Shift and drag. And Shift allows me to move it in a small increment, but this will give it just a little bit of thickness. And now I can decide as well that resolution up and up. That should work out pretty well for us, I think. Awesome. All right, cool. Now let's go ahead and fill out this inner section here. I might take these guys and I'm going to create a new collection up here. Just keep it in my main scene collection. And I'm going to take my Bezier circle and I'm going to Shift D to duplicate. And I'll just drag this in here and turn it off. So I've got this as a backup if I want to come back to it. So I'm going to convert this thing to mesh. So I'm going to go F3, convert to mesh. Now you can see this is a mesh object. Okay, so I'm going to take the edge tool here, or the edge selection mode, and I'm going to hold down Alt and click on one of those edges, and you see it'll select that whole edge loop. Let's Shift D to duplicate, and that will duplicate that edge. Now it's its own edge, right? And now if we hit P to separate by selection, what that's going to do is we've got two objects now, right? We've got the main mesh, and then we've got this little extra bit. Now let's go into edit mode for that extra bit. We can hit A to select all. I could just hit F to fill, right? And that will just create a polygon, an n-gon, which has many, many sides to it. So a polygon usually has 4 sides. This is an n-gon. It's got lots of sides. Let's hit I to inset, and we'll drag down. That's going to give us some actual polygon geometry, which is what we want. And I'll hit E to extrude, grab Y. We're going to drag it in. E and scale. Actually, instead of E and scale, let's hit I again, because inset gives us a slightly better result. So it's a bit cleaner on those edges. Maybe one more. I to inset, pull that down. E to extrude, grab Y. I'm just kind of creating some interest. I don't really know exactly kind of where I'm going with this, but I might even put a bevel modifier on this and change the amount. So I'll just drag it down like that. I'll right click and shade smooth. And then I'll come here to the green data tab for the object, and I will turn on under normals, auto smooth. And that is how we can make it look really sharp. Let's actually switch our view mode. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to switch to matte cap, and I'll pick this one. This will just help me see a little bit better. Let's experiment. I'm going to take this section here and I'm going to hit extrude, grab Y. I'm going to bring it out. I'm going to get rid of all these faces. Yeah, let's switch back to vertex mode. We're going to go to transparent X-ray mode so we can see through everything and select everything. I'll hit B to box select. I'll just go like that. Make sure. Just grab that one there. So I just want to select everything except for the ones that are right on the X axis there. Do the same on this side. B to box select, grab all those guys. And then we're going to grab everything in between here on the bottom. And then now by having the X-ray mode turned on, when we did that, we were selecting everything, even the stuff that was kind of hidden behind. So let's hit X to delete and get rid of all those vertexes. And then let's go over here. We're going to grab just get rid of the bevel for now. I've grabbed the mirror modifier and I went to mirror along the Y. And I'll turn clipping on just in case. I can turn off X-ray mode. And that's going to be good. And now what we can do is we can apply this. So come out of edit mode and go apply. Now it's all mesh, and now these all line up perfectly, just like we want. I do like that bevel modifier. It was working for us, so I'll keep it on. And now what I'm thinking we could do is, what if we grab these faces like this and delete them, and maybe grab these guys, delete those. All right. Now I just need to join all this stuff up. So go back to vertex mode, and we can just fill these out. I'm going to hide the bevel modifier because it's kind of confusing looking at it. So I can select 4 vertexes like that and then hit F to fill. I'll keep the ends open there. And I'll do this. Is there a quicker way to do this? Now what I can do is I can grab each of these guys. So holding down Alt and Shift, so it keeps the selection. I'm selecting each of those. Oops. There we go. Now what I can do is I can grab them on the Y. I'll bring them back in a little bit. I don't want them to come out that far. I'll hit E to extrude, grab Y, and then I want to rotate them all, but I want to do it from their individual origins. I'm going to rotate X 45 degrees, like that. Actually, you might even rotate X. Let's see, 15. Let's do 15. And then grab Y, just bring that in just a little bit closer. Actually, I'm going to look at this orthographic view on the side. And I want to line it up along the bottom. So I'm going to grab Z and just bring this down and just eye it up. I'm going to hit E to extrude. And I will grab Y and I'll bring it out a little bit. Rotate X 15 again. Let's start arcing this thing down. E, rotate X 15, it's the last one. And Y, pull that out just a touch. Now it's flat. And now I can hit E and just go straight down. That, come down to the floor. How far up these things are going to go from the floor? Maybe like that. And then let's hit E. And because we're still on individual origins, I can hit S to scale. And you can see it's going to scale up just around each of those points, which is really useful. E, grab Z. Looks pretty good. Maybe one more. Scale them out. Scale Y. E, grab Z. And awesome. Looks good. I feel like we need something here with each of these guys, the way where they connect. What I might do is switch to face mode and just hold down Alt and select each of these loops like that. And then hit E to extrude and scale like that. Scale on the Y like that. I wonder what it would look like if we did something like that, the classic do this. I do this way too much, don't I? That's so cool. Look at all that detail. Nice. All right, and then let's turn our bevel modifier back on, which will get a bit confused by all these guys. So we'll need to switch it, I think. Yeah, see how it's not working. I'll need to go to percent, and percent will work. Percent is kind of like the brute force way of doing the bevel modifier, and it'll work when things are a bit janky. Now we can take this guy and we can add a mirror modifier right along the the Z. There it is. Y is kind of cool too. All right, let's get some materials happening on this thing. I'm going to come over here, go to my material, and I'm going to click new to create a new material. I'm going to call this the belt frame. And I'll come over here, I'll create a new material, I'll call this the belt. All right, let's switch over to rendered view. And I'll come over to Eevee, I'll turn on ambient occlusion, bloom, and screen space reflections. And I'll go Shift A, create a light, sunlight, and I'll rotate it a little bit. And Shift E to duplicate, rotate it around the other way. All right, so we could just import some materials from our robotic arms, because it'd be good to see how they look with it. So we might do that first. I'm going to just save this real quick. Let's go to import. Let's go file, append. And I'm going to navigate to my robotic arm, which is one of these. And when you find the file, you can double click on it and it'll open it up. And then you can go into the material section. And you'll see all the different materials that we've got. And I'm going to go for the housing material and click append. And now you can see over here, I've got the housing material listed in my dropdown. So I can select this and I can place that on it, and bam, we've instantly got our cool rust scratch material. All right, so let's talk about this conveyor belt. So I'm going to go to the belt now, and I'm going to work with this new material. Let's find the node. So first thing I'm going to take my base color and I'll bring it down to like a gray. Now I want to have some panels on this thing so we can actually see it moving, and we're going to have some texture on it. So let's get the panels working first. I'm going to create a brick texture. So this brick texture is pretty cool. Plug it into the base color so you can see it. Okay, so now what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to lay out our UVs so we can get this thing to position the way we want it to. Because right now you can see it's doing some weird stuff. It's stretching along the top, and then along here it's getting the pattern. So I'll show you. I'll create a mesh cube, and I'll put the same material, the belt material, on it. You kind of see a bit easier what's going on here. This is the brick pattern, right? And then what it's doing is just stretching on this axis, and over here it's stretching as well. So it's not quite giving us what we're after, what we want at least. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn on my controls and stuff so I can see it. And I'll split my view. I'll drag this up here like this, and I'll come up here and I'll go to my UV editor. And I'll enter edit mode. And so here's all the faces. And we're going to need to UV unwrap this. Okay. What I want to do is find a point down here that we're not going to see. And I'm going to mark a seam. In fact, I'm going to click Alt and click it. That way it'll create this loop around the whole object. And now I can do is I can go UV mark seam. And you can see it changes color. Now, what I've done is I've told Blender you can actually cut this thing here in order to lay it out in a really flat way. So now if I go with all these faces selected, in fact, let's just focus on the main ones that we want. So this group here, I can come here and go UV and click unwrap. And you can see what it's done is it's laid out, it's basically cut the belt right there and it's flattened the whole thing out. It's unrolled it and flattened it. So it looks really nice. So now what I can do is I can take that UV. So if I type in UV map, and if you have multiple UV maps, you can use the UV map node, which is helpful because you can get all the different ones. You can rename them if you go to the green object properties tab under UV map. There they are. So, we call this our belt UV, right? And then select it here. Or you can just grab the texture coordinate node and use the UV output, and it will automatically select whatever the first UV is in this list if you've got a bunch here. So I'll just take this and I'll plug it in here. Let's have a look at the difference. There we go. So now you can see it's actually taking this grid pattern or the brick pattern and laying it out on the surface, and it wraps really nicely. All right, now let's work on this thing. I'm going to take my offset down to 0. I might use a different node actually. I don't know if this is the best one. Let's try the Veroni, my favorite node. Like such a geek when I say something like that. It's my favorite node, man. Let's go to the Chibichev, and I'll plug my vector in here, and I'll take my distance and plug it into the base color. And I will take my, let's see, I'll come over here and grab a color ramp node, drop this here so we've got control over the color fall off. And I'm just going to switch this to constant. And I'll drag this down. And then I'm going to take randomness off and my scale. I'll drag my scale up so you can actually see it. Just creates this like grid pattern. And wherever we place this, we can define these specific lines. Actually, we could switch this to ease and we could bring this one in. Now there's going to be a little bit of fall off on those lines. We can use it maybe with a bump system. Now let's actually stretch this out a little bit. So I'm going to grab a mapping node, drop this here. I'll just set my X scale to 0. It's going to just get rid of the X component, and now it just stretches it out. So now I've got these nice sort of panels. I can use the scale to determine how far apart they are, and then I can use the color ramp to determine how wide those lines end up being, or how narrow. Now what's neat about that is because we've used UVs, I can move here to my location and I can actually just animate this Y value, and you can see it's going to constantly do its thing and just rotate however we set this material up. We use this for the bump, I think. Get rid of that brick texture. We can get rid of the UVs. We don't need those anymore. And I'll move these guys over here. I'll take this down here. I'll grab a bump and I'll drop the bump here. I'll take the color and I'll put it into the height. I'll take the normal and drop it into the normal. I'll unplug the space color. And now you can kind of see what's going on. It's giving us this little bump. Make the distance 0.1, I think. Be able to enjoy that fall off a little bit. All right, let's give it a little bit of texture as well. So I'm going to grab a noise texture, and I'll duplicate my color ramp with Shift D, grab the factor, plug it into the factor, grab the color. I'll drag this out a little bit as well. Mix RGB, that's what I want. Drop the Mix RGB node there, plug this one in, and we're going to switch this to multiply. This will multiply these colors together. So remember, we have black is the number 0. Whenever we have white, it's the number 1. So when we multiply anything by the number 0, we're going to get 0. So it'll just get rid of it. So this is a good way of combining stuff. Sometimes add works a little bit better. So this is only showing up in the lines there, which is cool, but not what we wanted. Switch to add. Now we need to set up the vector so it actually uses the same system. Everything is going to need to be plugged in to this UV for it to work properly. Turn that scale right up. Now we're going to actually want this. We need another mapping node. So let's duplicate this one. Set all these back to 1, and let's plug the UV into the vector, and then let's use this guy for all these. Okay, because that way we've got one node that everything gets fed through that we can use to animate the positions. Now if I move this, it's going to move the bump along with those lines. All right, so now this is way too much, so we're going to back it right. Now let's think about the surface. Kind of like a leathery surface right now, isn't it? Going the right way. Let's check. Let's invert bump and just see if it looks better. A little hard to tell. I think that is better. Yeah, that looks right. Like right here. All right, so we don't want it this shiny. So let's take the specular down on this, and I'm going to turn the roughness right up. This is going to be a really rough, grimy conveyor belt. Now let's get some color going on this thing. So let's use this system, so the creases. So I'll duplicate this. I'll plug the distance into the factor. I'll plug this into the color. And now we can set some colors with this. So I don't want white and black. I'm going to take this and I'm going to bring this one up. And I'll take this one, make this dark. So like the creases actually kind of get a bit of a dark color. I'd expand that out a bit, like a bit of grime kind of stuck in there. Let's add in maybe a Musgrave. This is a great texture node for just some general patches of stuff, random patch. Grab our vector. Sorry, this is the one we want. Bring this in. All right, so we're going to take this, we're going to feed this into another color ramp. I'll just use this same one for now. Plug this in here, and then let's grab a mix RGB node, and we will drop this one in here. Take this color and pop it into the second socket. And we're going to go, I don't know, go add. Why not? Let's try add. All right. Now I need to find it. There it is. All right, cool. So now I got these big splotches coming from this Musgrave. I can change the scale. I can turn the detail up and the dimension down. And that'll really break up this. But it's kind of just this grayscale, gray tone thing. So what we could do is grab one more color ramp, stick it here, and then we can actually set some colors. And this whole grayscale thing will be fed through that color system. Let's stain it a bit brown. Keep that saturation down a bit. I feel like we need maybe like a more lines, like more of a texture along this. Oh, let's just try first. Actually, we just take the scale and turn it way up. What does it look like? We go really high with the scale on the conveyor belt. Now the trick is everything that lands on this thing, we need it to be moving with the conveyor belt, right? Gonna need a system that kind of marries up the speed of this thing with an object. What I really should do is go Shift A and create an empty. So we've got our empty here, right? And we want to take this position, right, in 3D space, just along the X, and we want it to map to this UV coordinate space, right? So right now, think about it. If I go into the UV mode, you can look at it here. These UVs are laid out in Y and in X. It's a two-dimensional space, right? So we can move this text around in those two dimensions, in X and in Y. Wherever this null empty goes on the X-axis, I want this texture to move along the Y-axis, because when it moves along the Y-axis, it's moving that texture along the surface of the belt, which makes the belt look like it's turning. So if we can do it at a rate that matches the rate of movement of this null, then they're going to look like they're moving together, right? So in order to do that, we need to get the positional value of this object, this X number, into our material. And to do that, we're going to need to use a driver. Now you might be thinking, could I use the texture coordinate node and use the object coordinate? But you can't, because what that's doing is totally different. It's actually looking at three-dimensional texture space in relation to where this object is and the object that you have the material applied to. And it won't give you the same result, because every point along the surface of this thing will give you a different value based on where this thing is in relation to it. So you're going to get this weird result that looks like it's stretching everything. What you want is just a solid number that's not going to change based on how far away a point of this object is to it. You just want to have that solid number to reliably move this texture. So what we want to do is use a driver to do that. So I'm going to click on the empty here, and I'll go to my location X, and I'll right click and I'll click copy as new driver. Then I'll come to my material here, and I'm going to create a combine XYZ node, and I will plug that in right here to the location. And then at the Y value, I'm going to right click and I'm going to click paste driver. Now it's giving the exact location. You can see this number here, 1.0628, 1.06279. So it's right here, right? Now, if I move this on the X, you can see that the belt's moving way faster than our little empty, which isn't going to be useful for how we want to use it. So we need to do some math. I'm going to right click and go edit driver. This brings up the little driver window that we can change what's going on. And I want to change what's happening. Right now, it's just taking the averaged value that it's getting from that number. But I want to switch this to scripted expression. Now, it's set up a different view here. You can see what's going on. It's got empty, which is the name of the empty, the object that we're pulling stuff from. So the property is going to this object named empty, and it's grabbing the path, so location 0, which is the first of the location fields. So there's the X, Y, and Z. These are labeled as location 0, location 1, location 2, like an array where it starts with 0 as the first one. So edit that driver again, bring this up. So location 0, and that's the value that it's getting. And it's going to call this variable, this value, it's going to call it location. This could be anything. We could call this X, and then we could make this X so it actually works. And then what we need to do is just do a little bit of math. So I'm going to multiply this by a number. Now I did the math already to figure out what it is. Now I figured out this math just by trial and error, entering in smaller and smaller values until it looked like the null was moving at the same rate. Might be different for you, depending on the size of your object. There's a lot of factors. So you'll just have to kind of keep changing those numbers till it looks like it's just right. So I'm going to go with this 0.025. And now if I grab this on the X, you can see it looks like they track together pretty nicely. There's going to be a little bit of variation and difference in the two, but for our purposes, it's going to work because now what I can do is I can grab, let's say, a cube here, and I can move it anywhere I want on the belt, and I can parent it to that null. And now if I take this null and grab this cube, is going to move along the conveyor belt, which is really, really cool. Well, I hope you found this tutorial really helpful and you learned a lot of amazing things to add to your tool belt. I hope you really enjoyed learning about textures and how to move UVs using other objects and create cool effects without having to necessarily deform geometry or animate geometry itself. So yeah, thanks for watching, and please remember to hit that like button if you enjoyed it. Leave me a comment, tell me about tutorials you'd like to see me make in the future, and don't forget to check out the Patreon over at patreon.com/cbaileyfilm. You can find all the live streams I've ever done along with project files for each month. So if you join up the different tiers, you can get access to that. Plus you can join on YouTube and get a hold of the live streams there as well. So check out those options if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next tutorial. Until then, see you later. Bye.